My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
We will be with you in this fight for liberty. And if our spirit is right and our courage firm, the world will be with us.
Tony Blair's decision to support the Iraq War was not popular in Great Britain. As his approval ratings plummeted, many feared he would lose his government.
Order! Order! It was quite possible that he would have been thrown out of government at that moment. If he'd not been able to get the vote through the House of Commons on the war, which he spoke very eloquently about in the House of Commons, he would have been out of government.
I urge the House to vote with the government tonight.
I called him and said, look, why don't you not join the coalition and keep your government? He said, look, I'm going to do the right thing. If it costs me my government, I'm going to do the right thing.
The ayes have it. Unlock.
He reaffirmed his personal and his country's support, and that he gave what I think will go down as one of the great speeches in modern history in front of his parliament.
The Prime Minister. Looking back over these 12 years, the truth is we've been victims of our own desire to placate the implacable, to persuade towards reason the utterly unreasonable, to hope there was some genuine intent to do good in a regime whose mind is in fact evil.
And he went in there and he delivered it brilliantly. The place was completely silent, they all listened to him, and I think he really changed a number of minds by the way that he delivered it.
This was a situation where Prime Minister Blair in his heart of hearts believed what he was saying and doing.
The only persuasive power to which he responds is 250,000 Allied troops on his doorstep.
Tony Blair's a pretty tough sort of guy, and he's used to political pressure. Interestingly enough, he was criticised when he first came to power as Bambi, as always following political trends and following political wishes. By the time he left, they called him Stalin, because he went on his own terms and not following public opinion. He was determined to do what he thought was right.
As the war unfolded, Bush and Blair discussed the military campaign regularly.
The president would have every couple weeks a secure video conference where the prime minister would come on a big television screen down in the Situation Room, and the president with his advisors and the prime minister with his would talk about Afghanistan, talk about Iraq. They really developed over this period of time a real common set of views about what needed to be done and how do we do it.
He and the president might have a 45 or an hour-long conversation on the video screen. Tony Blair often would follow up with a memorandum underscoring some of the points they made, raising some that he had thought of afterwards, suggesting a way forward, and President Bush would often respond.
President Bush felt he could bounce ideas off Tony, and Tony felt he could give ideas to President Bush and see if he would agree with them or not. So it was a very fluid relationship, a very intimate one, and one I think that was as close as perhaps relations have been between presidents and prime ministers.
By the summer of 2006, it was clear to both leaders that progress in Iraq had stalled.
The optimism that we had felt early in 2006 was rapidly evaporating as the war was clearly going very badly.
The situation in Iraq is unacceptable to the American people, and it is unacceptable to me.
A lot of people believe that maybe that was a foregone conclusion that he was going to surge troops in Iraq. It wasn't the case.
President Bush, as he was getting feedback from his planners as to what his options might be, began to share with Prime Minister Blair what his thinking was.
The new strategy I outlined tonight will change America's course in Iraq and help us succeed in the fight against terror.
A large portion of the president's advisors and the U.S. military opposed a surge. The president felt that the risks of basically losing this conflict were too large, and he had a kindred spirit there in Tony Blair.
We'd had, as I say, a long series of discussions with the commanders and with President Bush. He was intimately involved in that discussion of how you should go about the surge and how you should go about holding territory.
As a result of the surge, the new Iraqi democracy is on a firm footing. Bush and Blair weathered fierce criticism for their actions, and now history will be the judge.
The president took a very long view of history, and he believed that in the long term it would be clear that the removal of Saddam Hussein, the stabilization of Iraq, was a potentially transformative event in the history of the Middle East.
It is important to always remember that as a result of what George Bush did, what Tony Blair did, and especially what the Iraqis are still doing, the first Arab democracy has been born.
Nobody else on the planet was in the position that these two men were. They ultimately were responsible for the front end of the war on terror.
Today, both leaders stand by their decisions and by each other.
I saw him close up. And this is somebody who's genuinely motivated by a love of his country and doing what he thought was right. So, you know, if you are opposed to them and do disagree with them, when you come to consider him, consider the complete man.
We both came to the same conclusions, and therefore we were soulmates when it came to the freedom agenda.
Coming up, the roots of the special relationship.
We are going to win this war, and we are going to win the peace that follows.
How Franklin Roosevelt and Winston Churchill beat back the Nazi onslaught in the dark days of World War II.